I've shared with you before that Amanda and I, back in when we met in school, there was a Spartan race that happened at a military post near the school there. And so I did it twice. She did it with me once. And I've got a video here that's just of another kind of military training thing, but this kind of reminds me a little bit of what we did. Now, ours was called the Mud Run because they basically made everything wet and muddy as we were going through. It was a 4-mile obstacle course on the Marine Corps post nearby. And we'll get to that video here in just a second. This is the video we're going to show is actually from the Swiss Army training. And so you'll see as they go through various obstacle courses. Any of you guys been through obstacle courses before? Okay, I know that anybody who's been in sort of military training, I'm sure, has been over these. So you're crawling over things, you're crawling under things, you're swinging over things, you're sometimes having to help each other over them. You know, for us, when we did it, you know, sometimes we were having to push each other up or get one person up and then have to pull the next person over. Okay, but there's obstacles that are in the way that are between you and what you want to get to. And here you can see that these, I haven't actually started it yet here. Okay. There, you'll be able to see it. Now, those online probably won't be able to. But these guys busting out of there, and then they send this one guy through the whole course. And sometimes he has help, sometimes he doesn't. As he goes along, and you're having to navigate your way around this. Now, we had to swing over a mud pit when we were doing ours, had to crawl underneath a tank. There was one spot that smelled like it was like a sewer that you had to go underneath and through the water, kind of like underneath some barbed wire or camouflage netting. You're running up and down sand dunes, crawling over walls, different kinds of obstacles like that. Now, there are obstacles that are in our way anytime that we're trying to accomplish anything worthwhile. And what we're going to see this morning is that there is a man who is trying to get to Jesus or trying to get something from Jesus, and he is running into obstacles along the way also. Now, okay, we can go ahead and cut the rest of this. We don't have to keep watching him go through this. But yeah, they carry each other, throw each other down. At one point, they have to carry him on a stretcher, you know, all that kind of stuff. So we can go ahead and pause the video now, Jerry. Because I know that nobody's going to listen to me as long as we're watching that. Well, it's a little more entertaining. All right? So you can begin to turn to Mark chapter 10 is where we're going to be. And we are going to meet a particular person that has to face some obstacles in order to get his way to Jesus. Now, Jesus is on his way up to Jerusalem. We've seen this in the past few weeks. He's on his way there for a particular purpose. He is going to accomplish a mission while he is there. And he is on his way to die, and he's been trying to explain this to his disciples, which they've kind of been slow to get it. He's also been explaining to them about what it means to be a disciple or a follower of Jesus, and what it means to be a part of the kingdom. Now, the disciples struggle to see some of these truths, but what we're going to notice this morning is there is a man who has a significant handicap, and in spite of that, he is still able to see what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Okay, so Mark chapter 10, and we're going to pick it up starting in verse 46. Then they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a large crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many were sternly telling him to be quiet, but he kept crying out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped and said, "Call him here." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, stand up, he's calling for you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped up and came to Jesus. In answering him, Jesus said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabboni, I want to regain my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and began following him on the road. Now, we're going to go through and pick this apart verse by verse, but before we do, we're going to start actually in the very last phrase of the last verse. How does this passage end? With Bartimaeus following him along the road. This isn't just a story about healing. This is a story about becoming a disciple. A disciple is a follower or a learner. He becomes a follower of Jesus through this. And Mark puts this in here to exemplify what an ideal disciple is. A person who follows Jesus along the road. But to be a follower, you first have to overcome certain obstacles that are standing in your way. Now, the obstacles that Bartimaeus faces actually are very similar to some of the obstacles that we face also. even though our condition may be a little bit different than his. Now, his obstacles really are ours. And as we see his, I want you to think of three things as to how you might respond to what you see and what you learn here. One is to rejoice. If you see one of these obstacles that we're going to talk about, and you're like, wow, that's really in my past. I'm already past that obstacle. That's reason for rejoicing. But if you see an obstacle and you realize, wow, this thing is in front of you, it's still there, okay, realize it, name it for what it is, but then resolve you are going to overcome it. So if the obstacle is behind you, rejoice. If you realize it's in front of you, say, you know what? We can get this. God can take me over this obstacle if that's what it's going to take to get to him. So first we're going to see an obstacle that is very common to many of us. And this is where the first obstacle that we see with Bartimaeus, and that is the comfort of the curb. The comfort of the curb. There's space in your sermon notes there, an outline in your bulletin if you want to write any of this down. He's got that comfort of the curb. He's on the margin. Okay, he's not out in the action where the road is. He's not going anywhere. He's stuck in one spot. But sometimes, even though we're stuck someplace, we can become very comfortable with where we're stuck. It's become very familiar to us. I've been here for months. I've been here for years, and I can't seem to get past this. But you know what? It's comfortable. At least it's familiar to me. Bartimaeus may have seemed like he was invisible to other people, maybe the few people that would drop some change for him there to help support him as a beggar. But it was nothing that he could really do anything about. But let's ask this question. What if you realize, yes, my situation can change? It's possible that something could change. Would you get off the curb for that? Would you get off the curb for the chance that something might be different? It's a little bit dangerous. It's to get out into the crowd and to move away from my spot of comfort. People know that I'm here. They know this is where I beg. This is my spot. This is his workplace, really. I mean, this is how he gains his income, is by being there to get charity from other people. But what if my situation could change? Would I be willing to move? Now, that's one question. But what if you know your situation will change if you move? How much more eager are you going to be to get up off that curb and go if you know that it can change? Would you leave the curb? Let me ask you, what is your curb? What is your spot that you have been stuck in? And you're like, this is just kind of where I'm at. I don't like it. This is not the situation I want to be in, but I've just kind of resigned myself to the fact this is where I'm going to be. Nothing's going to change. You know what? I struggle with this in my life. I can't control this impulse. I've got an addiction or a habit. Or I have this terrible reaction whenever I'm around this person. I just can't really do anything about it. I'm in debt, and it's so big I'm never going to get out of debt. I've got a besetting sin in my life that I just can't seem to get past. Whatever it happens to be for you individually, what is your curb? Now, Bartimaeus, his backside was real accustomed to that curb. It left an imprint there because he was sitting there. He was. I'm not going to say he was content with it, but it was familiar to him. What do you feel on your backside? This is the place that I've been sitting for a long time. I don't like it, but it's comfortable for me. I want you to keep that curb spot in mind for what is in your life. Now, the curb's an obstacle, but the curb is not just something. It's not something that's in front of you. It's not an obstacle that you have to overcome forward. What it is it's something that keeps pulling on you from behind. It's something that's holding you in place. Now, what's holding you back from coming to Jesus for the healing, the release, the freedom, the overcoming of that obstacle? What is it? Is it fear? Is it the fact that I don't really know what's going to happen if I step out away from my spot of comfort? It's just the few coins that I get every day. It's enough to feed me. Well, is that really living? Is that really the abundant life that God has called you to? And if it's not, what's holding you back from stepping out and saying, Jesus, I'm calling out to you to fix my situation? So that's the first obstacle. It's familiar. But keep that obstacle in mind as we look at the second one, and that's the crush of the crowd. The crush of the crowd. The crowd was how he made his money. People coming by. If he sat there and nobody came by, he didn't make any money. He didn't gain what he needed to buy his bread for the day. Now, as he's sitting there, did you notice what happened? There was a crowd of people, and he was wondering, what's this? Because he would know from sitting there a long time what the ebb and flow is. Okay, well, it's morning, the sun's coming up, people are going to work. Evening, it's the evening rush hour coming by. This crowd was either big enough or at a different time that he knew something's different here. But he didn't know what it was. He had asked somebody as to what it was. There was this chaos of the crowd, though. It's not okay for me to go investigate. I have to ask somebody else, because for him as a blind man to get up and go into a crowd, he could get knocked down. He could get trampled. You guys heard about what happened at that concert recently. It was that these people got trampled in the midst of some thing that happened at a concert. It's not safe for a man to go out into a crowd. It's not ADA compliant, right? What I need to learn from this is that's passive resistance. Okay, it's not that the crowd is fighting him at that point. The crowd is just there being the crowd. The world around us is not really going to help us get to Jesus. The direction the world is going, they're preoccupied with their own things, that they are not going to be helping us to get to Jesus. And he realizes that he needs to take some initiative. And that's what we need to do too. If you are not comfortable being on the curb any longer, and you know that Jesus is within earshot, you've got to take some initiative, and you've got to call over the crowd. You've got to make your voice heard. I am going to call out to you, Jesus. I'm not just going to sit here and let you pass me by. Now, it's not so much the volume, not his decibels that make a difference here, but it's the description of Jesus when he calls out. He doesn't just say Jesus. He says, Jesus, Son of David. Son of David. That is a Messiah title. He realizes this is the one that we have been waiting for. I know who you are. You are the Son of David. He is calling out to him, and it's a statement of belief. Jesus, I know who you are, and that's why I'm calling out to you. I not only know who you are, but I know the power that you have. Did you know that when you pray, just by calling out to Jesus, that is an expression of faith? If you believe that he is, you can pray to him. If you don't believe Jesus is who he said he is, you're not going to pray to him. So just calling out is an expression of your faith. Now the crowd turns from a passive resistance to outright hostility when they have this command from the crowd that they say, be quiet. It says they tell him sternly. It's literally the same word as rebuke. You know, Jesus rebukes the wind and the waves. He rebukes a demon. Peter rebukes Jesus. Jesus rebukes Peter. It's that same word. This is a stern command. Be quiet. Would you just shut it? You've got no business crying out and interfering with what's going on here. But when we have that kind of resistance, we need to fight the crowd, and we need to keep calling out. There will be plenty of people around us who say, you've already cried out before. He hasn't heard you yet. Satan's going to whisper that in your ear. Other people might say, just give up. Jesus got nothing for you. They're going to be outright hostile to our pursuit of God because the world around us doesn't care, doesn't support us in our pursuit of the Lord. And so the more and more you pursue the Lord, the more vocal you are about it, the more the world is going to resist you. But his efforts pay off. They were pressuring him, not necessarily to surrender his faith, but to just silence it. And people are willing, right, to let you live out your faith as long as it doesn't interfere with their lives at all. Oh, you're a Christian? That's great for you. But don't take it outside of your church. Don't take it outside of your home. Don't take it into the public square where we say, but God says this. This is the morality that God wants us to have. This is the way that we're supposed to conduct ourselves, which means we need to change this policy. We need to change this law. We need to operate our schools differently, our hospitals differently. We need to operate things differently. It needs to change the way our community is. Would you just shut it? Would you just be quiet about that? If you want to believe that that's fine, don't vocalize it out for everybody else. That's the world that we live in. Bartimaeus, he's calling out, and the world tells him to be quiet. But his efforts pay off because he receives this call from Jesus Christ. And he says to come. Jay, I'm getting a bit of a buzz there. But we need to persist and to not give up. Now, I'm not going to take time to read this, but if you want to see a story of persistence in prayer, persistence in prayer, go to Luke chapter 18 and read the first 8 verses. It is a story of somebody who is very, very persistent in prayer. Jay, it's all coming from this monitor right here. I don't know if you can just kill that one or not. So keep calling, keep praying, because Jesus will answer. Jesus will answer. Something I read in one of the commentaries this week as I was going through this is that our faith has the ability to stop Jesus in his tracks. It's actually coming out of that one too there. That's it. With old electronics, you just tap on them and they get in order. Our faith has the ability to stop Jesus in his tracks because Jesus was traveling. The crowd was traveling. There was momentum. And when he hears Bartimaeus cry out, it says he stops. Your faith stops Jesus and gets him to pay attention. He is looking for faith. Remember what it says in the Old Testament, that the eyes of the Lord roam to and fro throughout the whole earth, looking for those whose hearts are fully committed to him. When he hears the cry of faith, he's ready to respond. Keep calling out to him. Now, even when you have Jesus' attention, though, we see that there is another obstacle that's in the way, and that is the cling of the cloak. The cling of the cloak. Now, if you, when we read through this, you think of the action here. It says, he's calling for you. Take courage. And what does the man do? He gets up and he goes to Jesus. But what does he do first? He throws his cloak aside. Now, I might think of that as being a he doesn't want to get tangled up in it. He's dirty. The cloak's dirty. I want to be that way when I present to Jesus. But a beggar, a cloak is something that is very, very important for them. Okay? So if they've got their cloak, I'm not going to actually put this on, but if they've got their cloak, this is sitting out in front of them like this. And so this is a place for the change that people would toss to them to get caught. They can't actually catch the coins right here, especially for a blind person, because if I'm a beggar who's just a paralytic, I can reach out my hand and take the coin from you. But a blind person, they can't. So this is one of the tools of his trade. If you can imagine, like David Ferris in our congregation here is an electrician, okay? If he was to say, I'm just going to abandon my work truck, I'm going to leave my toolbox, I'm going to get rid of that stuff, he wouldn't be able to do his job. Albert, who is a professional musician, okay, what if he was to leave his guitar? How's he going to earn his living? For Bartimaeus to take and to toss his cloak aside, what's he doing? He's giving up his way of gaining his income. I don't need it anymore. I don't need this because of the fact I'm going to Jesus. Now, I know some of you have disability license plates, right, or a disability placard that you can hang on your windshield, right? Okay, and you can get those fairly easily, but to get a disability designation from the federal government saying you're disabled, man, that takes a lot of work, right? Tons of paperwork, and you go through the paperwork, and you finally submit the paperwork, and then you get this letter back that says you don't qualify. Seriously. Okay, so then you fill out paperwork, and you might try a couple times, and then finally, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get a lawyer who's going to take a third of the financial benefits of this because I need that disability designation, right? Now, if you can imagine a person with that disability designation, what does that get you? Okay, some people, get you a check in the mail. It certainly gets you a better parking space. If you have to go travel on an airline, it gets you, in there quicker onto the airplane. All this because of that disability designation, okay? But for him, if you can imagine, he's taken that disability designation there, his cloak, and he's like, I don't need that anymore. Why? Because Jesus is there. Because Jesus is calling. He has paid attention to you. He has heard you. I don't need these things that I've been using because I know that God is going to heal me. And it's not just that God can heal. God is going to heal. Jesus is going to heal. He has that kind of faith to be able to discard his way of making his income and then come to Jesus. That's the cling of the cloak. Cast aside the cloak. Now let me ask you this. Your spot on the curb and whatever it is that's put you there, there are coping mechanisms we have all developed to be able to operate with the handicaps that we have. Handicaps of sin, handicaps in our body, handicaps in our emotions, whatever it is. Whatever it is that is holding you back, that you feel, are you willing to cast aside your coping mechanisms, the things that you have used to kind of make your way and say, I'm coming to you in full faith, God. I'm not going to hold on to those things anymore. I'm not going to have a plan B. I'm coming to you because I know that you can heal. I know that you can restore. I know that you can do this. Now, there is one more obstacle, though, that Bartimaeus has, but he just blows right past this one. This one, he just nails it. And that is the fact that he could conceal his condition, or he could choose to try and conceal his condition. Now, for him, it was really obvious. I mean, he was blind. Everybody knew he was blind. He knew he was blind. But Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Seriously? Why would Jesus ask that question? It's very obvious that this man is blind. Why would Jesus ask? Well, I want to put forward two possible reasons as to why Jesus would ask. It gave him a chance to confess his need, and it gave him a chance to show his faith. Because sometimes we're like Bartimaeus. I've got a problem that's big enough and obvious enough, everybody sees it. Everybody knows it. But a lot of us have things that are keeping us on the curb that, you know what, not everybody's going to notice this. I've got this emotional hang-up. I've got this mental issue. I've got some forgiveness problems. Some other people have wronged me. Nobody sees my bank account, but, here's my debt issue. Okay? A lot of times there are physical ailments, emotional ailments, relational ailments, other things that nobody else is going to see those. And Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? When that comes, it's time to confess. It's time to fess up and say, here is my problem, and I'm going to bring it into the light. If you guys remember in James chapter 5, where it talks about that passage where it says, if any of you sick, go to the elders, and they will anoint you with oil and pray for you, and then the sick person will be restored. The sick person will be saved and raised up. But what does it go on to say right after that? This is in James chapter 5. And it says, after that, therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. Confession is a part of the healing process. God, I'm going to name it. Here is my issue. Because if we don't bring it out into the light and name it, there's a couple of tendencies that we have here. One is we can minimize it. Oh yeah, I've got this issue, but it's not really that much of a problem. Or we can look at it and we say, I've got this issue, but it's really your fault. It's his fault, her fault. Somebody else did this to me. I'm not going to take ownership for myself. Or we think, yeah, this is absolutely, it's fully on me, but I got this. I can take care of this on my own. So we either try and fix it ourselves, we try to blame it on somebody else instead of ourselves, or we try to minimize it so it's not really that bad for us. And Jesus says, what do you want? What do you want me to do? And he names it right out there. I've told you about Pastor Harold before, the pastor that one of the pastors I worked with when I was doing my internship right after seminary. And I had come to knowledge that somebody was in need of some food. And so I was just going to go to the food pantry there at the church and kind of get some bags together and give them some food. And I asked Pastor Harold about it, and he said, no, they have to come. They have to come. And I was like, well, why, And he said, because they need to admit their need. They need to admit the fact, I'm in this situation. So it's not just a handout that's going to perpetuate the issue, but that they can come and say, yes, I am in need. And when we will open ourselves up and say, I am in need here, it opens us up to receive much more of the help that we actually need. Much more than just maybe the food that we need, but okay, why am I in this particular situation? Now, when we go to one another and we say, I've got this issue, and I need you to pray for me, sometimes what we need to do is we need to say, that's great, and we need to dig in a little bit. Is there a sin issue behind this as to why you're in the situation that you're in? Sometimes we're holding on to unforgiveness, and that gives that bitterness inside of us. And sometimes we're too stressed out about something because we're worried about stuff, and that's actually causing our high blood pressure or whatever. Sometimes it is a spiritual root to what we're seeing on the outside. We need to dig a little deeper. That's one of the great things about confession. Admit your problem. So why are you on the curb? You're coming to Jesus. You need to admit it. Name it. Write the name on it and put the sticker on it and say, this is the problem. This is what I've got going on. Now, we talked about barriers here, and that's not really the focus of this passage. The barriers are there, but the barriers are there to be crossed in order to get to Jesus for that healing. Getting off the curb is great, but that doesn't bring the healing. Being louder than the crowd is good, but that doesn't get you the healing either. Casting off the cloak is good, but that's not what healed this guy. What does it say in verse 52? Your faith has made you well. Literally, your faith has saved you. It's your faith. That's the focus of this passage. His faith. He knew who Jesus was, and he decided that he was going to do all that he could to get to Jesus, because I know that Jesus can and I know that Jesus will. I know who you are, Jesus. Do you know Jesus? Do you know him? If you do, it will change the way that you pray. I'm not going to pray, Jesus, if you would, please. I'm going to pray, Jesus, I want. I know you can. I know you're able. I'm trusting in you. And persist in that calling out to him until you receive the blessing that he is wanting to give. Now, faith is the focus. I want to read you two verses from outside of our primary passage today, and it's from 1 John chapter 5 and verses 4 and 5. For whatever is born of God or begotten of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that overcomes the world, our faith. Who is the one who overcomes the world but he who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? What overcomes the obstacles? It's faith. It's faith in Jesus. Not faith in ourselves, not faith in good works, not faith in any of those things. It is faith in Jesus Christ that brings us that deliverance. So, do you know him? Do you believe that he is who he is? Then call out to him. Cast aside the cloak, get up off the curb, get past the obstacles of the crowd, do everything that you can to get close to Jesus. Because it is getting close to him, getting in touch with him, that is going to bring